On today's Gangster Profile, Stephen Say, the Godfather of Boston's Chinatown.
Chinatown kind of unique community, I would say, and then they have their own rules.
Stephen Say, the Godfather of Boston's Chinatown. Now, incredibly, I can't find one photograph of this man on the internet, but it's still an amazing story, so I'm going to tell it. Stephen Say, known as Hai Long, or Sky Dragon, controlled the rackets in Chinatown from the late 1970s through the early 90s. Sky Dragon is a name of great respect and stature. It's basically the equivalent of Godfather. The dragon is of utmost importance in the Chinese culture. Even though he was an organized crime figure, he was well respected by the Chinatown community. He was seen by residents as a protector. He made sure that no outsiders would come into Chinatown and cause trouble. They overlooked the fact that he was an organized crime figure.
Person known as Sky Dragon.
Yeah, I know that person.
What would you say about him?
I mean, to me, he wasn't the bad guy, but I don't know what kind of business he does, on this side, just a regular normal guy to me. He's kind of protecting Chinatown. He have his, group, his group of people, and in Chinatown, try to protect and not allowing a lot of outside people come in to do, troubles, like that.
In Chinatown, crime wasn't rampant. Gambling was and is part of the culture and very socially acceptable. Chinatown is by far the most insular community in Boston, and besides the North End is the most densely populated neighborhood in the city. It's squished between the Mass Pike, downtown skyscrapers, and the sprawling Tufts Medical Center. Boston's Chinatown is the third largest in the country after San Francisco and New York City. While most of the city has gentrified and its ethnic enclaves have been diluted, Chinatown stands firm. Chinatown is a closed-off place. It's an awesome place to visit. It's by far my favorite neighborhood in the hub. There's great authentic food, live poultry killed and sold, old guys playing mahjong on park benches, but when you're there, it's crystal clear that you're a visitor and you're only so welcome. Traditionally, Chinatown has been so closed off that the police would rarely come there, and Chinese police themselves. Organized crime groups that ran every other part of the city wouldn't operate in Chinatown. All illegal money made in Chinatown stayed there. Stephen Say was originally from the hard streets of Hong Kong, where street gangs were rampant. Say was a member of the 14K Triads. The Triads were organized crime groups that operated in Hong Kong and mainland China. Triads were secret societies that were deeply entrenched in Chinese culture. They were originated in the 1700s in an effort to overthrow the oppressive Qing dynasty. Over time, they developed into the crime syndicates that they are today. When Say first came to America, he stood out among the young Chinatown hoods. Coming from the mean streets of Hong Kong and having the Triad pedigree, he was something like a rock star to these kids. He quickly started a new gang called Ping On, named after the Ping On Alley, the first Chinese settlement in Boston off of Beach Street. They quickly gained strength and became the main force in Boston's Chinatown. The younger guys in the gang called him Dai Lo, which translates to Big Brother, but in Chinese gang culture, Dai Lo is the equivalent to American gangs' OGs. They controlled the rackets in Boston, which consisted of gambling, loan sharking, prostitution, and drug trafficking. There were dozens of illegal gambling dens in Chinatown, with schedules for games posted on light posts around the neighborhood. It's said that families' futures were won and lost at these games. People would bet houses and businesses and life savings on these games. It was a wild scene. Chinatown bordered the combat zone, which was Boston's infamous red light district, and this was perfect for them to ply their trades of prostitution and drug sales outside of Chinatown. The residents of Chinatown respected Sky Dragon because this was a period of peace in the neighborhood. He brought order and stability to the rackets. Sky Dragon ran his operations out of the popular restaurant called Kung Fu on Tyler Street. This was one of his main legitimate sources of income, and he could be seen there conducting business on most days. This peace was disrupted in 1984 when Say was jailed for refusing to testify in front of a grand jury about Chinese organized crime. It most likely was to do with New York gangster Machine Gun Johnny Yang and his multi-million-dollar international heroin ring. Machine Gun Johnny was importing kilos of China white heroin and distributing it around the country through his contacts in different Asian communities. Sky Dragon's departure coincided with a huge influx of Vietnamese immigrants in Chinatown. The late 70s and through the 80s saw a huge influx of Southeast Asians into Massachusetts. They were fleeing their war-torn homelands. Large numbers of Vietnamese, Cambodian, and Laotians immigrated to the Bay State. Most Cambodians settled in the historic mill city of Lowell, which has one of the highest Cambodian populations in the United States, while Vietnamese mostly settled in Dorchester and the fringes of Chinatown. Between 1980 and 1990, Boston's Asian population doubled. The Chinese inhabitants weren't very welcoming to the Vietnamese and kept them on the outside. Even to this day, most of the Vietnamese restaurants are way down Washington Street on the edge of Chinatown. These new Vietnamese residents had a hard edge to them. Vietnam had been locked in a 2-decade-long civil war in a quagmire with the United States. The Vietnamese people might look unassuming, but they are very formidable, as the United States found out the hard way. After seeing the atrocities of the war in their homeland, the streets of Boston's Chinatown must have been a cakewalk. The criminal element of the Vietnamese refugees, because yes, in every group there are some bad apples, had no problem committing violence. Without their respected leader, the Ping Hong quickly lost substantial ground to the new Vietnamese gangsters. When Skydragon returned to Boston in 1986, he was not happy to say the least. The Vietnamese advances would not go unchecked, and soon violence erupted. The quiet streets of Chinatown turned into a war zone. This did not please the residents, who always respected Skydragon for keeping the peace. At the same time as this was unfolding, in San Francisco there was a Chinese self-proclaimed businessman named Peter Chong, on behalf of his Wo Hop To triad, linked up with notorious Bay Area gangster Raymond Shrimp Boy Chow. The two had consolidated their power base on the West Coast, controlling San Francisco, Oakland, Portland, Tacoma, Seattle, and now they were making inroads to New York City, which is the largest Chinatown on the East Coast. They were trying to create what they called the Tian Ha Wei, which means Whole World Association. They were trying to create something like the Italian Mafia had, with the controlling commission controlling illegal enterprises in different cities with large East Asian populations. They were meeting little resistance until they came to Boston and the Skydragon. Already embroiled in a battle with Vietnamese gangsters, he wasn't about to cut insiders in on his rackets. A member of the Tian Ha Wei named Dai Quan came to Boston and was pressing Say's underling about $30,000 owed for fake green cards. Say's underling said the green cards had never been delivered. Skydragon agreed to pay half of the debt just to squash the beef, but when Dai Kung demanded the payment be made at Say's Kung Fu restaurant, Skydragon saw this as Tian Ha Wei power move and blatant disrespect. He erupted in anger. He said, "Have I died? Am I not here?"
Face. Asian, everything is face. You know? If you don't have face, you don't have power. One group gets offended and they have to respond. So everyone is looking for face. You gotta have respect.
He called one of his lieutenants and told him to call feared enforcer Hung Tien Pham. Skydragon said, "Tell him to shoot him in the balls and in the head," referring to Dai Kung. "Tell Pham to bring the heavy metal." Later that night, Tien Pham spotted Dai Kung in a parking lot off Tyler Street and emerged from an alleyway spraying at him with a Uzi. He shot up some cars, but he missed his target. The message was sent and Dai Kung left Boston. Skydragon was feeling the heat and he left Boston for Hong Kong to let things cool down. Peter Chong and Shrimp Boy made one more attempt at Boston after Say left. Dai Kung went back to New York City and regrouped. When they came back to assassinate bike men, the only holdout against them left in Boston, the FBI was waiting and took down the entire Whole World Association syndicate. The late 1980s and early 1990s were the most violent and unstable time in Boston's history, even worse than the Irish gang wars in the 1960s. Chinatown also experienced their most violent period from 1988 to 1992. There were 24 homicides in the neighborhood and over 150 incidents involving firearms. This type of violence was unheard of in the insular Chinatown. Drugs and prostitution were rampant all around Chinatown in the neighborhoods of the Combat Zone Theater District and the Boston Commons. In 1990, the Skydragon came back to America with main enforcer Hung Tien Pham, a man who was becoming feared and respected in the Asian underworld. He liked expensive cognac, fast cars, and beautiful women. The Skydragon's control of Boston's Chinatown had diminished. Ed has his respect among locals after years of chaos in Chinatown's streets. To regain absolute control, he wanted to make a statement. This led to one of the most infamous crimes in Boston's history, the Chinatown Massacre. On January 12, 1991, on a quiet, snowy winter night, just after 2 a.m., 3 gunmen walked into a gambling den on Tyler Street and yelled, "Robbery!" They turned 6 men towards the wall and shot all of them execution style. One man, nicknamed Wrinkle Skin Man, was let go. Even though they yelled robbery, nothing was taken. 5 men were killed, and 1 man survived a gunshot to the head as he crawled out onto the snowy street crying for help with a fractured skull. He was brought to the hospital next door and survived. This was one of the most gruesome crimes in Boston history, and people were legitimately scared after this happened. It was the peak of an extremely dangerous and violent time in Boston history. I can remember being in Kowloon's on Route 1 when I was a kid with my parents, shortly after this, and in the middle of a busy restaurant, a guy dressed in a suit started screaming at a table full of other guys dressed in suits in Chinese, while another guy in a suit tried to pull him away. They were clearly all gangsters, and you could hear a pin drop in a restaurant with hundreds of patrons inside. I could feel the fear in the room, even as a kid, and that memory always stuck out to me. And now as an adult, I understand the gravity of that situation. 2 of the gunmen were arrested in China and surprisingly were extradited back to the United States in 2001, where they are now in prison for the crime. But the main gunman, Hung Tien Pham, is still at large. 2021 was the 30-year anniversary, and there was a lot of press and renewed interest in the case. Many residents say that he is dead now. Sky Dragon's grip was never the same again, and in the mid-1990s he was indicted in a RICO case and sentenced to a long prison sentence. Chinatown has returned to its original peaceful state, and if there are gangs or crime, it's completely underground. In a rapidly changing Boston, Chinatown holds strong and retains its authenticity while the rest of the city continues to be watered down. Now I hope you guys enjoyed this story. Don't be afraid to like or comment. And thanks to my new viewers, we're growing. Join the crew and subscribe. Till next time, try to take good care of yourselves and have a great day.
We don't feel have the police that protecting us that much, so we have our own way to how to protecting in Chinatown. Way back at that time, it's like a self-protecting program around in here.
Chinatown is part of the city, but a lot of time when they need us, we are part of the city. When they don't need us, they didn't even know where is Chinatown.